fala que eu toco desde 98, eu botei sem, não sei porquê.
Não fala?
Pra mim parece bobagem, eu ouvi ontem e fiquei tipo, mas entendeu?
Tá, vou ver se eu pulo essa parte. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third day of our After Memory Symposium. And I'm happy to introduce Thiago Leiros Costa, that we're going to do a lecture performance, kind of music-led meditation. But before, I just wanted to let you know some important information. And well, we're happy to be here in this beautiful venue today. The next roundtable will also be here. In the afternoon, we go again to the HFG. And also, if you didn't have a chance yet, today is a good day to visit the TKM, the exhibition. That this afternoon is free. So, yeah, I think in some after the round table, we still have 1 hour, or after here, like some half an hour. So, yeah, it's also a good opportunity today. So, yeah, I'm happy to introduce Thiago, who presents studies of air and smoke. And Thiago is an artist, psychologist, neuroscientist, and educator. He was born in the northeast coast of Brazil, where he has been performing live for a lot of years. And he currently works as a researcher and professor at the Politecnico di Milano, in Milano and Verona University, studying attention, perception, and the psychology of art. As a musician, he uses voice, stringed instrument, classical or prepared, and electronic, exploring concepts around Latin American folk, African ancestral guitar, free improvisation, sound design, and Paulinho Oliveira's deep listen concept. He current aims as an educator and performer is to seamlessly merge scientific and artistic practice and to encourage a critical look at the normative institutional practice. So, yeah, I think we can start, and Thiago will do a talk before, and then the performance, and then we will have some minutes to a short Q&A with him. So.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, everyone who came, and thank you, ZKM, for this beautiful experience, very inspiring, and I'm very happy to be here. So this is Studies of Air and Smoke. It's a performance in 2 parts, connected through a wire. And it's a recurrent performance that can take many forms. And this one is the one that we're doing today. So, as a starting point, I need to remind us that the world is sick. And I don't think you need much convincing. And I'm not here to talk about the disease per se, but I'm here to talk about some symptoms and some alternatives to the sickness. So there are many symptoms to this disease, or these diseases. One is careless use of awareness, the ever-changing and ever-evolving escapism of current days, and not analyzing our states of mind, and not analyzing how we belong in the world and where we are, not reflecting on our relationship with the self and with the others. The fact that we are constantly connected but feeling disconnected, so through social media feeds and a lot of different contents, always closer to everybody, metaphorically and also concretely often, but feeling particularly lonely or struggling with self-image, or there are many shades to this. And specifically the consumer-oriented escapism, that we are often escaping somewhere else, and there are multiple systems in place that want you to be a consumer, not to be an individual. And considering this consumer-oriented escapism, some of the biggest commodities we could argue, and we've been talking about it in the past days, are attention and awareness. They are constantly under attack, they're constantly under surveillance, and they're being colonized by some specific imperial voices. But as we have been talking, I'm also a scientist, and one thing that scientists should avoid is conceptual fragmentation. You know, the idea that we use the same words to talk about different things, and then we don't understand what we're talking about. So ground definitions are important. So generally in psychology contexts, when we talk about attention, we tend to refer to a process of filtering, of choice, and of selection of information, even implicit. It doesn't have to be always in the forefront of your conscious experience. Instead, when we talk about awareness, we are referring to the ability to perceive states and stimuli. This is very different from attention if we think about it. And attention is one way that we can use this superpower that's awareness. And consciousness instead mostly refers to the capacity of being aware. So we can have states of unconscious conditions like comatose states or general anesthesia, to talk about extreme cases. And these three words are sisters, but they don't talk about the same things. So when talking about focusing attention, it's important to remember that we can focus our attention inward or outward. And why is that? Because attention is a focus that can move around different things. And this also serves a certain level of ergonomic information processing, dynamics of the brain and of our biological systems, because the amount of information that there is out there is too much for us to process with the adaptations that we developed. And we need to filter out some of them and to engage with others. And we take this for granted most of the time, and this is related to the uninspected existence that I was talking about. If we consider a quick exercise and a quick reflection on how to focus attention inward or outwards, or what attention is, if I ask you guys to focus on the pressure that your shoes is making on your feet, you would do it now, you can do it, but you were not doing it probably before I mentioned it. You were not focusing specifically on how your feet are being touched by your shoes and by your socks. So if we continue doing exercises like this, and if I may invite you to do so, we can also move this focus of attention to different places with our eyes open, or with our eyes closed also. We can move them to the back of our legs on our chairs, right? And then we're there. If we're not in the shoes anymore, we can move it to our elbows. We can move it even to internal states, and we can try one that is particularly exciting. We can move it to our heartbeat. Can we do so? Reflecting on how our heart is beating inside our body. I can feel it, but I'm on a stage in front of everybody, so. And connected to the feeling of a beating heart, we have one of the most important tools that we can have to modulate all these states, which is breathing. So we can also reflect on our lungs and our breathing that we take for granted and don't think about oftentimes. So you can get your lungs full of air and see and pay attention into how it all changes inside your body, and you can empty it slowly and pay attention to how it changes also. So our capacity to move attention around inwards and outwards is remarkable. And what we focus our attention at is a great determinant of our existence. And this is a big deal because our capacity to dream, our capacity to imagine things, our capacity to create images and narratives inside our minds is also remarkable and is indicative of the fact that we can create worlds out of nothing, out of thin air. And in current neurosciences studies of imagery as a phenomena, we now understand also that when we imagine something, and we imagine a parrot, or you imagine someone that you know, the areas in the sensory processing areas in the visual cortex that are activated by imagination are very similar to the ones that are activated by actually seeing the stimuli. So our capacity to create worlds is remarkable, and we can move our attention around different things, and what we prioritize would basically change the life we do. This can seem banal, but I would argue that it's not, because you can have an existence focused on aggression, an existence focused on only sexuality, or an existence focused on, publishing papers at universities. And this is related to a lot of the symptoms I talked about before. So I would argue here that reconnecting is a remedy. And when I talk about reconnecting, I'm talking about reconnecting to yourself, your sense of self, how you belong to your body, how your body belongs to your awareness, how you can navigate the world physically and mentally, and how our self only goes so far, and how it connects to other people around us. And there is a system in place that really don't want you to think about this too much. So what I propose is that meditation and this critical self-inspection are strategies for reconnecting. So a lot of this stuff happens in the brain, right? And this is here to remind you that the brain is just a piece of flesh. It's nothing else than that. It's the biological substrate that creates this lively experience of phenomenal awareness that we have. However, how we go from biology to the experience that we are all sharing here right now is a big mystery that we actually don't really understand. There is a branch of neurosciences and of philosophers and of scientists that are informally called the Mysterians, because they believe that there is a mystery of consciousness that cannot be reduced to biology. But we can all agree that the center stage of most of these processes, at least, will have to be in the brain. We have no reason to believe that it happens elsewhere. And a key concept here is that the Homo sapiens is great at mental time traveling, and this is very connected to the topics of the symposium, and particularly today. So thinking can be oriented basically in three ways. We can think and orient our ideas to the past, or to the present, or to the future. And we have everything to believe that this is a peculiar superpower of the Homo sapiens. And this is actually something that I want to focus on today, how we can go from past to present and to future seamlessly with phenomenal awareness. And meditation can be a very special tool to do so. And I don't know, 50 years ago, in medical doctor-oriented centers, in academia, and even in psychology, people were not talking about meditation much. It was a hippie thing, right? So recently, this started to change, and now there is a whole hype around it. So this is an amazing book written by John Kabat-Zinn, who is a medical doctor, but also a longtime meditator. And I love the title, Wherever You Go, There You Are. And the idea is that currently we are always overexcited by information in a different way, considering our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, etc. The amount of choices we need to do every day, the amount of information we need to handle can be overwhelming. And we didn't evolve to handle all these choices and all these informations. And this overexcitation is related to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, personality disorders, a number of issues, attention disorders. This is all medical terms, right? And recently, meditation has been more and more accepted as an approach to treat or to prevent some of these conditions, and also just to promote well-being in general. So this is just a quick graph from a paper from the prestigious journal Science in 2010 that is often cited when we're talking about mind wandering. Something that often, I would assume, most people don't reflect much about. But most of what we do is mind wandering, to the point where at a certain point people discuss the idea that the default mode of the brain will be to time travel, will be to mind wander, to think about the past, to think about other people, to think about future things that I need to do. And this is a study on mind wandering, and they basically did an analysis through a device that receives notification and asks you, what are you doing right now and how happy you are? And their data shows that people are the happiest when they're not mind wandering, when they're focusing on what they're doing, whether it's washing the dishes or having sex or listening to music or walking in the park. So that's even better than the pleasant mind wandering. And that created a whole hype towards how meditation interventions that can focus on the present are particularly relevant and particularly exciting to promote well-being. And then people have been talking a lot about default mode networks, and it's a big buzzword in the neurosciences these days. And I just said that mind wandering is the default mode of the brain, so that's the set of networks in the frontal and parietal cortex mostly that are particularly active when you're thinking about what you need to do in the future, when you're thinking about yourself, self-awareness and reflecting on who you are and your personality, or thinking about others or the past. And we have every reason to believe, and a lot of data shows that meditation practices can deactivate these networks in a way that is related to better well-being and to better adaptation and to better cognitive function overall. So reflecting on what meditation could mean, this is a citation of Kabat-Zinn. Meditation is an invite to drop underneath your thinking and abandon the notion that your thinking is you, when it's actually just phenomena that emerges in the mind. So all these narratives that are floating in our brains are one branch of phenomena of awareness, but this is not the whole of awareness. There is much more beneath it, and meditation can connect us to this. So, as he says, awareness is not thought, it goes beyond thought. And we have many schools of meditation, and I'm going to cite a few here, just as a possible trigger and inspiration. So mindfulness is a big buzzword, and it's better accepted in medical context, and a lot of it focuses on focusing on the present moment by using anchors like focusing on your breathing and etc. But we have also focused attention meditation practices of different kinds in the East and the West. And the idea is that you focus on one object, you look at one object and you focus on it, and that creates a meditative state. And that's present also like in Steiner-based education practices, and it's all over the world. Differently from that, we have transcendental meditation, one that is also promoted by the David Lynch Foundation and is popular in Hollywood. And it's about reflecting on a mantra. So you repeat a mantra in your head and you arrive at a place where they call a state of, a field of pure consciousness that is beyond thought, that is another state of awareness. We also have a lot of Eastern practices like Vipassana meditation and many others. And we have this umbrella term that can be called guided meditation, and it's a bit of what I propose today. So guided meditation is, as the word says, guided by someone. It's a narrative that helps you focus on a specific branch of thought. It's very different from the others. But the one we're doing today is very different from what you've seen before, maybe. So one thing that all these meditation practices have in common is anchors. They all have anchors, either the mantra or the thing you're focusing on or your breathing. They're all anchors to help you get to this deeper or different field of awareness. And one could think that sound is a perfect anchor also. And this has been used in a lot of religious practices over the years, since the dawn of time, most likely, music has been used to gather people in some specific and special condition of awareness, and also in spiritual practices. So what I propose today is to use sound as anchors for meditating together. And as I said, music is present as a potential, something that has the potential to lead you to a peculiar state of awareness that is related to what meditation does. But these days, we are often disconnected to this in the world of commercialized live music, and we are always, thinking about what we're going to post in our feeds to say that the concert was cool. And a lot of the music is, related to repetitive patterns that are also less organic, and we normalized it. But this is a big topic. But one thing that struck me recently in the last few years was when I got in touch with the work of Paulina Leiros, that has become remarkably popular in the last years, and I'm very happy about it. And she's a pioneer of many things. But the thing that we're going to talk about today is deep listening. And there is a beautiful book on it. I highly recommend. But if I had to summarize some of the ideas that are relevant for what we're doing now, what she wants to promote with deep listening was to challenge the passiveness with which we listen, because most people don't reflect a lot on how sounds travel to space and how we listen. She wants also to question the protagonism of vision, because we are always moving around thinking about, visual references, and in contemporary times, the auditory spectrum is a bit left in the backstage. And she wants to bridge the gap between sound and consciousness, creating these peculiar states of awareness. And she has a number of exercises to do so that range from many different things and involve even dreams. And this inspired me to think about exercises myself and to create new ones. And thinking about the world of Paulina Leiros connects me to some other ways to think about awareness and meditation that are distant from the science approach that I'm talking about until now. And if we think about First Nations and indigenous people, there is a different way to reflect on nature that is disconnected to the ones that we see now in contemporary scientific practices. And the scientific practice of today can be summarized to a fair extent as a process of controlling and exploitation of nature. And you're going to get funding. The more you control it, the more you exploit it, the more you're going to get paid. But other looks that are more focused on regeneration, on coexistence, of respect for nature, respect for the environment, are less relevant. But they are actually the foundations of the thinking in indigenous populations. So this is a fantastic book, very, very, very deep. It's from Bruce Albert, an anthropologist, who interviews David Kopenawa, who is a Yanomami shaman. And you can really go in depth into a lot of these ideas there. And through an investigation of my own self and of my own ancestry also in Brazil, I got more inspired to look into awareness states that are induced through music and that are connected also to this First Nations narrative. So this is a picture from the Pancararu Nation in the northeast of Brazil. And they do a lot of music that ranges from very structured square rhythms to very unstructured, rhythmically and also harmonically and melodically in a way that is totally disconnected also to the tradition of the tonal systems that have been developed by their colonizers. And this unstructuredness and going from lack of structure to a lot of structure is something that I always so identify in the schools of thought like spiritual jazz and free jazz. And here is just a slide of Alice Coltrane because, I love her. But then I want to create an experience that connects all these different dots that I'm talking about. And another key element is general minimalism, but also how it's approached when assessing folk music and folk traditions. And the American primitive guitar, as played by John Fahey and other people, are always a beautiful example on how to do that. And it's related to the Appalachian tradition of folk music and tonal music. So you don't change tone a lot. You remain always in the same space, and repetitive loops in the back. And this, at least when I listen to it, takes me somewhere else. And then one way that I approach it, and particularly in the performance of today, is with the Brazilian viola. It's an instrument with Arab roots that arrived in Brazil to the Iberic Peninsula and has a lot of different traditions all over Brazil and is very underexplored. But it's one of my favorites. And it's very related to modal music and to modal scales. So this is a sound-guided meditation session. So I propose freedom and respect and a non-judgmental attitude, as you will have in every meditation environment. And you can do it in two approaches. Free association, so you can just be here and go back and forth, and it's really fine. But you can always do a more strict guided meditation using some of the triggers that I'm about to mention. So free association, beautiful. But you can go back and forth between both approaches. It's important to remind that the silence is as important as the sound. So when there is silence, it doesn't mean that it's over. And concretely, we invite you to sit comfortably or move freely, but try to not impose yourself on the people who are around you. You can also leave at any time. It's really fine. Just avoid disturbing them. Avoid fighting back the thoughts that come through. So accept them and leave them. And if they go away, they go away. If they don't, they don't. But don't fight back ideas that pass through your mind. Just have this acceptance attitude. Try to disentangle different sound elements and focus on how it travels to space is one of the first triggers. So sound travels to space. It's pressure that is moving around in space. And different elements and different frequencies travel differently. And we can inspect that when we're having a lot of polyphonia going on. So you can use this as a trigger to travel. You can use loops as anchors. So things that repeat can be used as mantras. So this is quite clear. And when I sing or you hear something that reminds you of air, you can try to focus on your breathing. So ways to breathe, you can breathe however you like, but if I would propose one, it could be to breathe in and to feel your lungs, but don't push it, in a relaxed way. Don't ever push it, don't ever make it hard. And then breathe out slowly in a longer pace, emptying your lungs, and ideally even empty your diaphragm and all the air that's in your belly. So using these three general triggers, we can do something together that I'm about to start. The last thing I want to say is that the sound today is triggered and inspired by three main themes: grief, empathy, and a will to heal. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Thiago. Wow, it was beautiful. It's interesting. My experience with meditation is through yoga, and we normally started with a mantra, but it is very different. So I was wondering, maybe my first question, and then we can open or continue the discussion in the break, would be if it is meditative for you too while playing. How do you feel while you're playing? And also I'm happy to bring this connection. I think that this is very appropriate, this idea of connecting your practice as an artist and scientist. And I was wondering also that I'm currently in a research institute that is very much science focused. And recently someone gave a talk about the notion of expanded science, but in the end dealing with all the limitation of science as academic field. And then someone asked a question, okay, but how can I find a job? It doesn't seem that the academic system is open to expanded science, in fact. And then it's good to see that in arts still there is, I think it's very welcome, this interdisciplinary in a space like media art museum. I think it's something that we are happy to make this bridge.
So thanks. Yes, that's a great question, and I agree with everything you said about expanded science and the difficulty to find jobs. But it's most of the time when I play, it is a meditative experience for me, and also related to the state that we call flow. That's something that I try to do because I was just improvising, so everything is improvised, it's great in the moment. So there is a certain state of awareness that is different when you're doing that. But considering the project specifically here, that I needed to think about like a little bit of, equipment and etc. and doing the guided meditation. So my meditative experience becomes a little bit more limited in this approach because I'm thinking about how to take the sound around and how to make sense of it. It's different from me just playing at home. But if you're doing guided meditation with someone, as we did yesterday actually, this person is reflecting on a lot of other issues, and that's arguably not necessarily the deepest meditative state. But yeah, I've been out of the thinking world for sometimes as I did it. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, also for me, because the sounds are so familiar with with Brazil, the northern coast. So I was at some point was very majestic. Was also like projecting memories, like kind also mind flowing a little bit, but was beautiful. Yeah, so maybe we can, someone have a question, or we can continue the conversation in the break, because we are kind of run out of time. Or if someone want to ask a question, we can wrap it up.
Maybe just a quick question, because you mentioned that you're also developing your own exercises based on Pauline Oliveira's deep listening. I'd be curious about the exercises, how this guided meditation is related to them, and your process of development of them.
Can I use this one? Yeah. Maybe. Yes. Oh, yeah. Great. Welcome. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm in the process of developing more ideas. The idea of doing studies of air and smoke also in a time-limited context is something that I appreciate very much, but I would like to develop a project like this also with like more gatherings where we can discuss some issues in more depth, and that could be one of those, and also try different specific exercises, specifically on looking at different frequencies or different rhythms and ways to play with structured and destructured music. Those would be the general lines. But also different ways to play with rhythm and breathing can be one general, seed of an idea, among others. So ideally, I hope I can present this in other contexts also, where I can go in depth into some of the narratives, and also the lecture part and the argumentative part, also going into more detail on different aspects of awareness, and also in the cultural traditions and the ethnographic aspect of it also.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I have lots of questions, but I think one that would be interesting, like to be on this environment, for you to expand a little bit. You talked about like how you want to kind of connect your practice as a scientist. Oh my God, the feedback is a bit weird. Sorry. How you want to connect your practice as a scientist and an artist together, and I wonder if you could expand a little bit about the boundaries between them, because in your presentation the boundaries were really hard, right? There was moment A, moment B, and whether you think these boundaries could be a little bit softened or muddier, to use something that Lisa said yesterday.
Those are all great questions. This is an effort, as I said in the beginning. Like this is a performance that aims at being recurrent and at taking different forms. And this is the first time I do it like this. And I wanted to have a hard boundary. It's true. Like I even take my shoes off. So that's a hard boundary in a way. And also because a lot of the schools of thought and the attitudes in both fields are currently very separated, and this is how I experienced them living and working in neuroscience departments and in psychology departments. Now I also teaching at an interaction design department. There it's a little bit different, but then I just approach it more wildly anyway. But that's a bit of the status quo, and it reflects a little bit that. For me, it's already particularly subversive just to do both things in the same space, and also the exercise of observing myself doing it is something that I find very exciting, like these two shades of activities that I develop. But I would love to do it in other ways that are muddier, and I like mud. There's a lot of mud where I come from, a lot of mud-related metaphors. You might have heard of some of those, like the mangi is one, yeah. So we love mud where I was born, basically. So I would love that, and I would love to brainstorm also and further develop. And this is also a potential to collaborate also with other performers and other thinkers. So let's talk about this over beers.
Great. Beers or coffee or yeah,
coffee,
we'll have now a coffee and beers later. Yeah, we'll have time. Okay, just one more quickly. Okay.
I guess I didn't understand, but maybe I dreamt too much. This should have been a guided meditation?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
At a certain point that you could do both, right?
Okay.
Free
And then, I understood. I thought it should have been a guided meditation, but then I didn't understand what was the guided part in that meditation. I didn't.
Yeah, so it's a different type of guided meditation. I tried to explain in one of the last slides that you could use some of the triggers that I was giving, like to think about breathing when I was making breathing to related sounds, or when I was singing. So this is also related to a whole reflection on mirror neurons and how we connect our body representations to the people we are observing and to the stimuli we're seeing around, but it's a whole argument that I didn't take because there's a whole presentation on that. But it's related to the neurological basis of observation. So breathing would be one of those, and using the loops as a mantra and reflecting on the loops would be the other guide. And the third guide that I proposed was to reflect on how the sound moves through space. So on purpose, I was emptying and filling in the space with sound and filling in with different types of frequencies, very high frequencies, and very lower frequencies at other times, and all these frequencies travel differently. So reflecting on how the sound travels to space. But yeah, but this is not the typical sound, guided meditation in the sense of like, think about the jungle, you know. But it's, and that's okay, that's beautiful. We've done a beautiful one yesterday, actually. But it's an idea of being more disruptive and more free and more respectful to each person's rhythm and way to approach it. So this is how I'm approaching for now. I don't know if that answers the question and if that sails.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, yes, thank you. I think the guided meditation I knew were language based. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's the idea, to do something based on sound and something more free and less structured.
We are kind of running out of time, but I think, let's do just one more question, and then we continue in the break here because we have the roundtable starting in 20 minutes.
Yeah, just a short question. You frame it into this meditation space. Have you ever worked with dancers, like maybe not this after the thought, but within the expression and movement boundaries, or exactly, like dance and sound traveling together?
Yeah, body is a big part of a lot of these meditation practices. In the work of Leiros is very present, where she does a lot of like body-focused exercises also, and yeah, that would be great. But on a certain level, I like to approach it in a more disruptive way, like disconnecting music from expectations of dancing, you know, a bit on purpose, but that would be an angle that I would love to explore, because the relationship between body and rhythm, like, will just take you way somewhere else, like way deep, and maybe more deeply in the moment also as you move, right? So yeah, that would be a beautiful angle to take.
Okay, yes, great. I think we can finish here, and we are back in 20 minutes for the roundtable. See you soon. Thank you. Como que desliga aqui? Não, 3:12, tá tranquilo.
Mas aí quando tu me falou era...
discussion at the end? Really short, really. So try to go to the point of the presentation. You have 5 slides, and so kind of okay, it's just an appetizer. Okay, I assume everything seems to work right now, and we will start when I receive some signal that everything is okay, but I don't know from where. Let's see. Yeah, okay, let's go. Then I have different notes here. Yeah. Yeah, this one. Okay, so first of all, so today is the third day or second official day of After Memory after the opening, and yeah, and yesterday we were talking a lot about space and the role of space, and now we are slightly moving to time, and we are running out of time as always, and it's quite interesting because the digital somehow had some problems, but somehow allows also people that is not here to communicate with us here. And the same happens with the time. So actually we are streaming, that will be safe in some servers. So hi, people of 2050 or whatever. Just hope that everything is fine for you. And that has been possible because we have an incredible team working here in the background, helping us with the streaming. And that's, yeah, really great. So thank you very much to everyone. Yeah. So now we are going in, you see, today is a little bit experimental. We did the workshop this morning, and yeah, and then this kind of reset. And now we are trying to do a roundtable, and we're trying to do with some difference. So, and discuss these aspects of time with different peoples that come from quite different perspectives and see what's going on. So the first thing that is quite strange is that me and Inge Hinterwaldner will co-moderate that, and it's quite quite an experimental format. So let's hope everything works. Inge, here on my left, your right, holds a professorship for art history at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Karlsruhe, Germany. In 2023-24, she's senior at Collegium Helveticum, Zurich. Her research focuses on interactivity and temporality in the arts, computer-based art and architecture, tectonics of programmed art, image and model theory, expressiveness of fluid dynamics, and the interdependence between the arts and the science since the 19th century. She's principal investigator of the research group Coded Secrets, artistic interventions hidden in the digital fabric, dealing with net-based artworks for a variety of perspectives and disciplines. Art, art history, computer science, media informatics, digital conservation, and visual cultural studies. Okay, now we will introduce what we are trying to do here, and it's to mix these different perspectives. And one of the points is that we titled this roundtable "The Digital Now" as a buffering circle. The buffering circle, for the ones that you that don't know that, is this boring thing that happens in YouTube when you want to watch something, and it's this round kind of charging and so on, and it can be really desperate and so on. And we thought it's a good idea to talk about the time in the digital age, because it's actually quite the promise, the contrary of what it promised. So it's like, okay, it's not working, so something is loading and so on. And actually, Inge has been working a lot of things not working, and that's a little bit the idea, this distance that we get. Okay. Yeah, so what we wrote here was digital technologies promise to connect us seamlessly with every moment across different temporalities. Thus, past, present, and futures seems to have collapsed into a perpetual now and drown in flows of information, data, and news. However, these virtual infrastructures are owned by private corporations. Internet users are tranquilized with loading bars and circulating buffers as they wait and queue to access the memories they have entrusted to platforms. Increasingly, the digital past is becoming delicate, ephemeral, obsolete, and inaccessible. How can we remember or forget when we are no longer the keepers of our own data and thus our digital and digitalized memories? Okay, so I will start. Let's do that with Charlotte, for example. Yeah, we try to go as alphabetic as well. Yeah. Charlotte, do you have a microphone?
I think so.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Hello.
So
It's not working, but
yeah.
the other way around. Hello, hello.
No?
No.
Okay, I can pass my microphone. So Charlotte Eifler is an artist and filmmaker who explores the politics of representation in relation to technology. Her works in the field of moving image, extended reality, installation, and performance address the intersection of digitality, archival practice, and speculative futures. Eifler's projects utilize experimental storytelling technique to question existing power structures and imagine alternative forms of history production and social coexistence. Her work has been shown internationally, including Sapporo International Art, Japan, ACM, SIGGRAPH Digital Art, Los Angeles, Staatliche Kunsthalle Baden-Baden, Art Basel, Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin, Impact Utrecht, Kurzfilmtagen Oberhausen, and Rencontres Internationales Paris, among others. The floor is yours, yeah, and everything seems to work.
Hello. Yeah, it's working. Okay. I need this.
Yeah. No, this one is Lisa pushing to the next.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I would go back to the first slide, maybe. No? Yes. Okay, I just, real quick, I thought this one, I found it. I remember that I did this project and we were talking about this swabber. And I just thought like, yeah, I did the work about this waiting line of, for the process of the potential future. But we won't go in there now. So yeah, hi. I'm Charlotte Eifler. I'm an artist working in the field of moving image, extended reality, and installation performance. I'm very interested in how soft and hardware manifest certain ways of seeing, ways of remembrances, and therefore the production of reality. So today for this panel, I thought I will present maybe two works of mine which deal very different with archives. One is establishing an archive and the other one is working with an already established archive. And maybe we can go to the slide, the next one, yeah. This project, Archival Grid. It's a project I did together with the filmmaker Clarissa Thieme, and we were invited by one of the largest public archives on war crimes from the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. And this archive was not intended to become to be an archive, but became later because it holds so many documents made for the court. And so we were invited, and we choose to have a look on the video archive about the civilian sniping and shelling in Sarajevo in 1992. And what we found were, maybe quite striking videos. These videos were made to generate virtual mappings. Virtual mapping was the first time invented not invented, but applied during this war. And they did these video recordings of witnesses and victims of these snipings, asking them to show in a technical run-through where the sniping was coming from, where it hit, and where they have been at this moment. And they could not speak, so we have videos now and documented an archive of people just showing traumatized people, but not without a voice. They were silenced due to court reasons. So maybe we can go on. Yeah. We decided to. It's a three-part installation of seven. No, it's a seven-channel installation, and it contains 3 parts. And one part is dealing with. Also, maybe for this panel, interesting, the technology we use, where does it come from, the military legacy of these technologies. So if we now go with geomapping, I mean, it was a colonial and imperial project, and even filmmaking cameras having quite a military background. So if you go to the next slide, and this is one aspect of the work, but then also we went really into the process of these archives, because there's this question of ownership. So there are people now portrayed, but without their voice. Do these people maybe want to add something? Do they want to edit these archives? So we talked with the victims and the witnesses, but also with the investigators coming from the US, Canada, and Germany, and to dig into this process of producing material which will stay for quite a long time, but actually the people who are portrayed in that, they have not much say. And I wanted to show an excerpt, but I don't know if the time, okay, so then we can maybe show one of the excerpts. The sound is quite. There is no sound. There should be sound. I mean, also interesting. So this is the part where a fictional archive, where we don't know if the archive is teared down or built up in the video, and then it goes together with the material we had in the existing archive. There is some sound, I think. Maybe it can be a bit louder. It's just a chair.
Ja ću sada označiti tu lokaciju koristeći žutu boju u spreju.
We could stop here, and there is another excerpt for 1 minute where someone is also talking, like very shortly, about this.
International community during the war and after, trusting them that they will serve justice and that I will feel as human being, worth human being, but I didn't. I was just someone who was helping them to do their task, and their task was, you should do this and this and nothing else.
Je to normalno, ali kad su mi rekli da ne možete ni denar dobiti, niti vi samo objašnjavate ćete nam rukom i pokazati gdje šta znakovima, jer inače normalno da sam osjetio potrebu da kažem sve što je bilo, da im govorimo na glasno i jasno.
Okay, so this is one project I brought, and maybe we have some points to talk about the ownership of data, or like, yeah, what archives are made for. And the other project I brought is called Feminism as a Browser. And this is a project where it's based on a mail archive of an international feminist network, including 300 members, international, mostly in the age of 50 and 90. So there's quite an experience, a lot of knowledge, and they were founded, I mean, in the 90s to working all their hackers, cyberpunks, media artists, activists, theorists, and in this very male-dominated sphere of digital culture back in the 90s, at least, they were thinking, okay, we really have to connect, we have to support each other. And most of the projects are kind of not accessible anymore due to they are not matching the parameters of today's systems. And so there is some erasure of history. And I thought, like, how can we transport this knowledge at least to some next generations? And maybe we can also, go to the next. The idea was that I invented a cyber child called Yeva, and I just said to this network, okay, now you have a daughter or a son or whatever, but you really have to deal with it. You have to deal with the next generation. And this child is coming to question you. And Yeva is raised in the internet, has the knowledge from the mail archive, and is going towards their mothers to ask about what's going on, what's the future of the internet. And if you go to the next slide, there we have several members of this network. So I'm traveling whenever I can, to different places, and then in the persona of Yeva, always performed by someone else, who's then joining afterwards the network. This archive is growing and also changing. It's really an archive which comes into place through the dialogue between generations and towards each other. So always when there is an interview happening, there will be meetings with members in these cities. So this is another project, and I think I won't talk about this one now, just out of time. But these are the two projects which bring different questions to us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. We will go to the next person. I think we can continue with you, Gabriel.
Wow.
Hi. So, Gabriel Menotti is Associate Professor and Chair of the Screen Cultures and Curatorial Studies Program at Queen's University. He works as an independent curator in the field of media practice and has written extensively on various themes related to image, institutions, and technology. His most recent publication is the historical anthology Barbarian Currents, Documents, Inventories, and Ideas from Brazilian Media Arts, co-edited with German Núñez, and he also coordinates the Besides the Screen network.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks, everyone. My slide is actually a browser. So this idea of endless instant, or how we kind of approach memory through the present, I think it's a good invitation for us to move away from the reification of memory. So instead of looking into these bundles of information, instead of looking at content and kind of reacting to it as things that we have, it's good to think about memory as experiences we co-produce in the present. And in that sense, it's a call to pay attention to the labor involved in that and the set of practices of remembrance that are particular to memory. And in that sense, I mean both preserving material traces and preserving also the systems that allow for the legibility of these material traces, which are ongoing challenges, as I think it will be discussed for all of the projects here that engage with archives. Maybe they are the biggest challenges when it comes to archives. And I wanted to bring two examples of fields of operation, I guess, or frameworks of operation that deal with these, let's say, grammatological concern of keeping the legibility of material traces. And one is concerned with how you produce in the present memories for the far future. which is the field of nuclear semiotics. Very exciting name, very exciting problems, because it's about how you create warnings for people in the far future, like 10,000 years from now, that some sites are sites for the disposal of nuclear waste that will be hazardous for more than 10,000 years, you know? And languages often don't survive 10,000 years. So you have all these very, very serious field and research that try to come up with solutions. They try to really achieve a sort of universal message, universal memory of the fact that some site is, well, dangerous for everyone. You should not come here, this place, ever at all. And these are some images, conceptual art images made by Michael Brill and Safdar Abdi in 2011 that kind of translate these very important warning into this horrendous field of spikes. So even after we have forgotten English, Portuguese, Portuñol, and all the other languages, maybe we'll bump into this place and realize that we should not come near this site, ever. So this is one of these fields of operation. And the others, perhaps more familiar to all of you, if you could please change to the next image, which is generative AI, which is very interesting because it draws a lot of its kind of objective authority from the fact that, and efficiency as well, from the fact that it amasses all these indexical data from the internet and kind of is able to extrapolate it in ways that seem plausible. But this is just noise disguised as signal, and that's really a problem. This is, in fact, work by a Brazilian artist, Mayara Ferrão. And as you can see, it's a very beautiful, evocative image, kind of creating a past that did not exist like this, but might have existed otherwise. And I think that there's a number of problems here. One that's evidenced by the fact that it's shared on Twitter without references. And in a way, we see, again, this kind of upcoming model collapse as these images go back into the internet and get back into the training data. And in a way, they pollute the models themselves, but they also pollute our systems of knowledge more broadly, you know? People are doing searches more on ChatGPT than Google these days, also because Google is getting worse by the minute. Underneath there's kind of clarification, a credit, or maybe not anymore, wow. That was kind of issued the next day, which is already like 10 years in internet time, so it's rampant for misinformation and misattribution. But I guess that the perhaps more perverse or problematic thing about these images and this falsification of the past is how this, let's say, very beautiful image of queer subjectivity, it's very abstract as well, it's very kind of black queer subjectivity, it's taking the place of actual historical queer, black queer subjects that are not represented in the archives, which in a way might detract us from looking for material traces of these people, from testimonials. And in a way, it's also a process of erasure that's substituting actual people by doppelgangers made by corporations. And I think that institutions are not prepared to deal with these kind of images because, yeah, they're great. And artists, they are amazing, but a lot of artists these days are Trojan horses for, Anthropic and OpenAI, etc. So, yes, memory, endless instance, very difficult questions. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much. That was quite a statement. I will go, I like this idea to go from this nuclear semiotics, saying, yeah, don't come here, to quite of the contrary, and it's the digital trying to come into connection, but yeah, having difficulties on that. And I think Barbara will be then the next. So Barbara Filza is an arts and media historian and has taught at various universities in Germany and Austria. She's currently based in the Institute for History of Art and Architecture at KIT, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, Germany, and working on her research project, City Room Art, exploring images of the digital imaginary, funded by the German Research Foundation since 2023. Her other main areas of research are video art, documentary and essay film, and the history and theory of photography.
Okay. I think we have to, I think Lisa is doing the slides, right? So maybe if I could have the first one, please. While this is being prepared. Thank you, Lisa, Natalia, and Victor, of course, for the invitation to participate. It's been a very interesting conference so far. And since Victor already told you what I'm researching, my research project involves the topic of memory on several interlinked levels, including the medium itself. Read-only memory is, of course, the clue here. And artists' explorations of memory through the digital medium in the works I'm studying. The main aim for me, however, is to look at how the digital image is conceptualized in these artworks. So I'm not going to present an outline or anything of my project. I've prepared instead a couple of somewhat cursory remarks on issues connected to it that might intersect with what the conference wants to address. Okay, thanks. I wonder how people remember things who don't film, don't photograph, don't tape. This is one of the many musings on memory and remembrance voiced in the letters of a fictitious traveling cameraman that are read out by a woman's voice on the soundtrack of the 1982 essay film. It doesn't work. Okay. Sans Soleil by Chris Marker. The French filmmaker, renowned for his exploration of the image in conjunction with memory, remembering, and history, and ever keen to experiment with new technologies, of course, would go on to try his hand at a CD-ROM released in 1997 entitled In Memory. The issue raised in the program note for this roundtable appears as an update of this question of the relationship between media and memory. I quote from the program notes, how can we remember or forget when we are no longer the keepers of our own data? So now it's just doing what it wants. Sorry. How can we remember or forget when we are no longer the keepers of our own data and thus of our digital and digitized memories? End of quote. Descendants of Sans Soleil's wandering cameraman, a voracious collector of images from around the world that the film presents in a seemingly disorderly yet hypnotic flow, today would maybe ask themselves, I wonder how people remember things who no longer have control over the images they've made and don't store them on physical media. This, however, still assumes that videos and photos did and do still have a mnemonic function, which might be up for debate in this round table. It might no longer even be remembering, and with it, keeping and storing, which are at the heart of making videos and taking pictures with digital devices, but sharing and connecting, which renders the images transitory and transactional. This is at least what media scholar Josie van Dijk suggests has happened to personal photography on social media. I don't want to abandon storage yet, though. The vastly increased storage capacity of the CD-ROM was one of its major selling points when it was introduced in the mid-1980s. As has been routinely pointed out at the time, its approximately 650 megabytes represented quite a leap from the 1.44 megabytes of the standard floppy disk used back then. Also common was highlighting that this allows the CD-ROM to, I quote from a paper from 1995, present texts, sounds, images, and moving images at the same time. I just let that sit there. Another recurring feature of early appraisals of CD-ROM is the translation of its storage capacity into more tangible units of measurement. I quote, 250,000 pages of texts, or 1,500 full floppy disks, or 74 minutes of CD audio, high-fidelity stereo sound, or a few thousand images, reads a particularly elaborate example from 1987. Over 30 shelves of books came, of course, from a librarian as an equivalent for one CD-ROM's capacity. Being able to fit large repositories of information onto a small disk that was marketed as durable and permanent made CD-ROM appear perfect for, quote, data storage, archival storage, and multimedia disks, end of quote. It was presumably primarily the multimedia disks that the already quoted librarian had in mind when she raised the question where CD-ROMs themselves would be institutionally collected and stored. Shelves of books were what they did find themselves among, because they mostly ended up in libraries, causing librarians to ponder how they could be made accessible for their patrons. So this will take, okay, there we are. Differing system requirements and inexperienced users, and maybe you can read this on the slide, starting Puppet Motel. Make sure the Puppet Motel CD is in your CD-ROM drive, is explicitly in the guidelines there, and this was from 1995. These were among the factors which made this an issue even back in the medium's heyday, in a library setting, but at home as well. Leaving problems like production errors, scratches, warping, or disk rot aside, the presumed material longevity of CD-ROM has quite quickly been rendered irrelevant by the obsolescence of requisite software and the replacement of CD and DVD by web applications, streaming, and cloud storage. Many interactive CD-ROMs are no longer playable, their content no longer retrievable without effort expended, for example, to run them on old hardware, to emulate former operating systems, or reprogram them, a fate they share with other digital art. CD-ROM, once the height of digital memory media, has been consigned to the scrap heap of history, and many a CD-ROM has actually been thrown into the bin. Despite what my introductory quote might have suggested, Chris Marker did not subscribe to the notion that audiovisual recordings, putting it rather simplistically, preserve moments witnessed and experienced in the past and make them retrievable and relivable. It is certainly there, for example, in the nostalgia-tinged ruminations of Sans-Soleil's globe-trotting cameraman about his craft, but is undercut by pointing up the uncertainty, the semantic, representational, and material instability of filmed and photographed images. This is done by, for instance, reporting them in different contexts, by demonstrating how their meaning can change over time, or by impeding the perception of what they represent through the use of a video synthesizer that destroys their photorealism and makes it seem as if they were already disintegrating. So, yeah, there it is. And of course, sound does play quite a big role in Chris Marker's work. What surfaces through the strategies mentioned, but also the seemingly aleatory kaleidoscopic montage, is the dynamic nature of remembering and the rewriting, reforming, reconstituting, or erasing that occurs in the process. The digital, back when it was primarily associated with hypermedia, seems to have appeared to Marker as an ideal to further explore the processual aspect of remembering, which is what he did with eMemory. CD-ROM offered storage space to include a wealth of materials, images, texts, and bits of sound, from the personal archive of an again fictitious filmmaker and photographer who coincidentally shares his name with Sans Soleil's itinerant cameraman. Users can access these materials by entering one of the 7 so-called zones, and you see the entry menu here, labeled, for example, travel, museum, memory, or photography. And follow the paths that fork, cross each other, sometimes also circle back to the beginning, or transport the user into another zone. In a rare comment on his work, Marker has confirmed that the important aspects of in-memory are, indeed, this arborescent structure and the involvement of the users in navigating what for them is an unknown territory. In the constellations of text, sound, and images, and the paths that lead to them, for Marker, it is the image that acts as an equivalent to Marcel Proust's Madeleine, the small shell-shaped piece of cake dipped in tea, the taste of which sparks a train of vivid memories of bygone days for the narrator of the novel In Search of Lost Time. Fittingly, it is a portrait of Proust, which greets the CD-ROM's user under the heading, What is a Madeleine?, upon entering the memory zone. The portrait next to it shows Alfred Hitchcock, director of the movie Vertigo, among others, whose protagonist, Vertigo's protagonist, tries to rewrite the past by resurrecting his lost lover, Madeleine, through a lookalike, an endeavor that is described as an act of an insane memory in Sans Soleil. And of course, I wonder what Chris Marquet would make of any efforts to sort of resurrect in memory. Maybe he would classify this also as an insane endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, René, prepare yourself. Also the, yeah. So René G. Cepeda is a Mexican multidisciplinary designer, artist, art historian, specializing in new media art. His studies include information design and software development, museum studies, and art history master's degree in the UK, and a PhD that combines design and curatorial practice to help curators engage with interactive new media art and create exhibition that retains the meaning and interaction of such works. As a curator, he combines his artistic background, including 5 years as an artist apprentice, to create immersive and interactive exhibition that combine formal curatorial practice with creativity in the design and implementation of spaces and objects to create exhibitions that can both entertain and educate audiences. His current research interests lie in the preservation and dissemination of new media art, particularly in the field of interactive art.
Okay, thank you. Can we get the slides? Or do I just? Well, it doesn't matter. We'll start real quick. So it's interesting what you were saying about the madness of reviving, Barbara, because my research has been focused on this thing that I call techno-necromancy, which is a new term. It's anchored in this idea of necrotechnologies, that is, technologies who are dead, and I expand it to artworks themselves. I'm doing this in collaboration with Constanza Salazar, who's working at Cornell, right? No, sorry. Cooper Union in New York. And we've developed this idea that what happens with works that have been forgotten and abandoned, or whose creators are no longer around to give them guidance. So we draw from this idea of necromancy. Necromancy has 2 meanings. It's traditional literal meaning and a more popular culture one. The traditional one is this communication with the dead, right? And that is what we achieve through the reading of archives, of finding documentation, other people who interacted with the work, who had experiences with it, both as spectators and as co-creators. But then we also have this aspect of necromancy that we think of when we think of zombies and monsters and Frankenstein and all these things, of bringing the dead from the back. Okay? And part of that is also this recognition that bringing something back will never be the same thing. It's not a one-to-one parallel, right? Let's see. Okay, so one of the things that's important for this is, although Namjoon Paik's TV cello is still a thing that's preserved, one of the things that is missing from it when you walk into a museum is its context and its epiphenomenal qualia. Meaning that when you see this work, you may assume, if you're a normal person, not an art historian, and you're walking in through the museum galleries, you will look at this thing and interpret it as a sculpture. If you take the time, and if there is a label that explains the work, you might understand that it was actually a part of a performance, something that was meant to be used. Of course, in 2024, we cannot crack open the cello out of its containment and get another musician and get it to play it, because there would be concerns with conservation, damage, all these kind of things. So what we are saying through techno-necromancy is that we can do this parallel thing where we retain the original artwork, but we also create reinterpretations of the work that are still active. That is, you can see a performance of the TV cello. And this becomes more and more important as more and more of the TV cello itself deteriorates. There will be a point where we cannot get more CRT monitors. And then we have to enter into this realm of what did it look like. Even now, we don't know, like if you're someone from my generation, we don't really have an idea of exactly how it worked, because what we have is video from 1970s. So what did it look like? I can only learn so much, and that is the qualia. Like if I don't experience it, I may know everything about color, I may know everything about the theory behind it, but if I don't experience it, I will not get it. And so what we're trying to do is to open that discussion. We're not saying this is how you should do it. What we're trying to do is open this discussion within conservation, museum, and even artistic practice to consider what do we do with these works that have lost it all. And I make a very big emphasis on when they lost it all, because if we have a state, when we have the artist, that's a different thing. If we have the instructions from the artist, I want this work to deteriorate. For example, Jody.org. Jody as a collective has stated that they want this work to continue to degenerate until it eventually will disappear, and they consider it a performance, which is fair. However, eventually it will absolutely and completely disappear. Jody, I am not aware if they have left instructions on how to, if it's okay to revive it, I don't know, 100 years in the future or something. But we want to we use it as an exercise, not as a prescriptive thing. So what we are arguing is, well, how would we reinterpret this back? How, if we only have images, memories, texts from curators, who oftentimes are focused more in talking about the importance of hyperlinking than the actual interactions that existed within the work, or what happened. For example, right now we talk about Blink, but I do not know which parts of, I could have gone through the whole code and find every instance of Blink, but even then, I don't know exactly how it looked, because Blink is a deprecated command in browsers. It was only present in Internet Explorer as well. So it becomes a question of how do I reinterpret this, and should I do it, and if I do it, how? And finally, we go back to Brazil. This is, I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, it's, or could you do it, please?
Deserto Desejo.
This is a piece by Brazilian artist Gilberto Prado. I was in Laboratorio Arte Alameda working with him, and this is a piece that was made on WebVR. And the plugin no longer works. So when he was asked to include it in the Museum of Sao Paulo, he had nothing. So he had to do the process that we're talking about now. So I have this backup that has been done before. And he talks about collecting pictures, because he himself doesn't have like a photographic memory of what happened. So the new version, which is now Unity video game, that's already changing the context, because this is a web page. Now it's completely different, and it probably doesn't look the same, but he did it using like the recollections of what he had, like the few videos that existed, a few photographs, and the text from a catalog, and all these things. And in the end, what he created is something that, what he says, it retained the poetics of the work. And that's what I want to do, retain the poetics of the works and preserve its experience for the future. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's getting interesting slowly. Lisa, I think you can now take a break, because Andrew, the next one, is not having a presentation, which is fantastic. And we will start the conversation here. And so Andrew Hoskins is interdisciplinary professor at the University of Glasgow, UK. He has been researching the relationship between media, war, and memory for over 20 years. He's founding co-editor-in-chief of the Cambridge Journal of Memory, Mind and Media, founding editor-in-chief of the Journal of Digital War, and founding editor-in-chief of the Journal of Memory Studies. He is author-editor of 10 books, including Radical War, Data, Attention, and Control in the 21st Century, together with Matthew Ford, and The Remaking of Memory in the Age of the Internet and Social Media, co-edit with Kui Wang.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Victor, Natalia, and Lisa, for putting on such an exciting conference, and so many interesting people. It's been really, really fascinating. So it's a real honor to be here. I just want to confine my remarks to generative AI and memory, just because that's what I'm working on currently. And I'll start off with a temporal tension, because that's the topic of the panel, really, about time. And then proceed just to make 5 points so we can get on with the discussion, because all your talks have been just so interesting. So I would rather, anyway, let me get on with mine. I think there's a tension there. There's kind of two temporalities in the development of generative AI and memory. On the one hand, characterized by acceleration and experimentation, and you see this with the proliferation of dead bots. What I argue that we're heading headlong into the dead bot society. Someone said to me the other day that I was very dystopian, and maybe I am. So acceleration, experimentation, absolutely. Services like Personal.ai and Replica, although Replica have been around for a while now, that offer to duplicate you or copy you or provide versions of you. And the second trend is the opposite, really. It's fear, it's stasis, it's blockage, it's forgetting. It's, especially around those institutions charged with memory. So I do a lot of work in Japan with museums in the city of Hiroshima who are charged with keeping and preserving the collective or social memory of the hibakusha. Hibakusha are the survivors of the atomic bombings in Japan. And they're at this really critical stage, because most of the survivors, of course, are over 85. So this diminishment of living memory, how to preserve it, how to keep the survivor testimony, all themes that have come up before, including in Charlotte's great talk. And I think it's characterized by fear that if they use generative AI to record and produce and reproduce survivor testimony and survivors, then they'll lose control over it. They already have lost control of the memory narrative, but that's another story. So two tensions then, two temporalities. Let me just make 5 points, drawing on, in terms of generative AI and memory, drawing on our great workshop this morning. We focused upon digital participation. So, that's really where the fundamental shift between media and memory happened in the 21st century. Participation in, immersion, dependency, a shift from, I argue, from reliance to dependency on digital tech, enabled, of course, new forms of producing and knowing and duplicating and storing and sharing and remembering you. And this, for me, is our great vulnerability of this age, kind of shadow archive of us. And of course, we all know this is already exploited in the mining, in the hacking, and the selling, and stealing of personal data, and the tracking of what militaries call our patterns of life. But this accumulation has been waiting for something, I think, even more powerful, to render it accessible or processable, meaningful, usable to new ends by the companies that have given us the tools to produce ourselves. That something is generative artificial intelligence. And absolutely we can say, I think, that the 2020s are marked by a convergence of advances in huge computing power with the greatest memory dump in history. And certainly this gives us a new monster of memory in terms of scale, but also it's and we've heard about this already, it's a monstrous memory. The toxicity, the anything and everything, and the ends to which it can be put. We're churning up and reproducing and remaking the good, the bad, the ugly, but of our own generation. And this is the point earlier on we come back to about distant memories, and we've never liked the memory. We've never liked what our forebears did. We've never liked early generations or understood them. We've always tried to change the historical record, or erase or cover up or hide, but this is our generation's stuff, that's being churned up now. And so what do companies do? Well, of course, they get humans to watch it so that we don't have to. Okay. And if you look at some of the recent commentaries around what generative AI actually produces, there's this interesting term called AI slop. And maybe that's a useful term. Is that what the past has actually been reduced to? Okay, secondly, so my first point is digital participation. What has that led to? Secondly, AI breaks the relationship between what psychologists call the encoding of the past into memory and its later accessibility. So through generating a past that never existed, it breaks this relationship between encoding, storage, later retrievability. And by encoding, I mean the ways in which humans perceive, get and learn information, so they can store it and later retrieve it as memory. And of course, psychologists tell us that if information about an event or experience is not encoded, then it's not retrievable as memory. And the stuff that AI generates from learning through discerning patterns in large language models fed with huge amounts of data was never perceived or encoded as something intended to be retrievable as memory in the future. So AI prompted memories then are, generated rather than retrieved. We can no longer believe our own eyes, when confronted with this. That which seems strangely familiar but unreal, a kind of uncanniness, isn't there? Uncanny memory. The past that never existed is here. Thirdly, there's a long, long history to this seductive idea that if only we can record everything, then that gives us power and control over memory. And that's through fiction, and it's fantasy, it's cinema, it's all through the 20th century. There's a huge history of this kind of fantasy and fiction. But it's no longer fantasy and fiction. At least the companies, the startups and the companies that have proliferated since the advent of ChatGPT, early 2022, it's more like generative AI's reality. So have we come at the point now where this long history of this imaginary of total memory is actually here? Because these companies are based upon the idea that they record anything and everything around you so that you can record it and revisit it and remake it and have control over it. So fourthly and relatedly, there's a chatbot memory boom. Be these audio or avatars created by consent, which may, of course, offer comfort to the bereaved and assuage trauma, or deep fakes that are not. Okay, bringing the living and the dead into new relationships. And there's kind of two types of chatbots, really, prospective and retrospective. Prospective are the ones where you record stuff, have conversations with your loved ones so that in the future they can revisit you, talk to you again, have conversations with you again, or your dead bot, if you like, if that's a more common term. And then retrospective, where people dig up stuff, collect stuff in order to produce an avatar or a dead bot that they can talk to. And of course, there's all kinds of issues, ethical, legal, personal issues around these trends. And my fifth feature then, the proliferation of dead bots smashed the generational boundaries of memory, revolutionizing the capacity to redefine the memory of a lifespan of an individual and society. And, there's been a whole digital afterlife industry running for years. But what does generative AI do to transform the opportunities and risks for the persistence of you? And a question, a big question, I think, that seems to be throughout this conference. Don't new forms of memory require new forms of forgetting? What does that mean? What does that look like? How we talk about all this multiplicity of forms and types and shapes and agents, absolutely agents of memory. But how on earth will or should or could they be forgotten? Are we now all unforgettable? And so finally, I argue in my work for a third way of memory, to realize how AI offers new context, new forms, new imaginaries of the past, the intersection between humans and machine. So part of this is a kind of... See, I'm just so digital with all this paper here. It's great, isn't it? My students just despair. So on the one hand, this third way of memory, there's a kind of new human, machinic, and individual collective conflagration. So this offers this apparent panacea, for new imaginaries of what would and what could have been. So this is, of course, vital for new ways of putting the past to rest, for moving on, for rediscovering and remaking all that was precious, yet since blocked or lost. But this third way of how the past is made and lost also comes at tremendous, of course, human cost. The same technologies which affect the workings of a conscious and active, a world memory, also obscure the risks of ownership and use and access, costs and finitude of the past. And that's what I talk about when I talk about a graying of memory. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I loved your inputs, and I think it's really a rich starting point that we have. I'd actually like to start off maybe with a silly question, because when preparing for this panel, we had a discussion about our Signe icon, like the throbber image, and I actually wanted to ask you what you would associate with that. And if you are thinking about your own presentation and work now, would there be this rubber image that you would put on top, or would other kind of icons come to your mind if you should characterize your position here? So you showed the rubber image in the beginning already. What would you associate? What did you think about when having this proposal?
It's a very strange question. But it's a good one, yes. I actually love that symbol and what it represents, or it doesn't represent. I mean, it represents like this kind of invisible labor. We're expecting efficiency, we're expecting results, we're expecting responses, and then the system says, no, not now. Just look at it. Look at more. Yeah, it's hypnotic in a way, right? And it's meant to soothe you. It doesn't. That's nice, I guess.
I think so too. I think it's a kind of a mediation. I used really to long have a look at rubbers to just come down, like waiting again. But no, but I mean, in this work, for example, I used it as a, like breaking up this binary, the throbber in all the fields between white and black, having all the gray areas inside. But also, I mean, I just thought like it's going like the clock, and maybe in our case could be nice if it's also going backwards, like changing the direction, because we are like in between the future and the past. So I mean, in terms of archiving, I think if this would make both ways, I think this could be on this presentation, maybe. But yeah, what do you think?
Thanks. Yeah, no. So what image would I use to try and represent memory, forgetting, and the now? I guess, you know, a lot of the people I talk to, like photojournalists who work in kind of war zones, you know, just kind of despairing in the digital era just because, and especially in Ukraine, where there's, you know, dozens of journalists producing dozens of photographs of the very kind of similar events, and they come to me, they say, well, what can we do? And I've been working with the artist Shona Illingworth for many years now, and what we've come up with is a series of what we call blueprints, and blueprints are based upon, you know, those diagrams, those plans of the architecture of the physical building, as a kind of template to kind of layer. I should have brought the image really, to layer, if you like, the different temporalities and spatialities of the experience of, in our case, war, media and memory in Ukraine. So we have different photographs, different video bits from YouTube scattered across, you know, original photographs of glass, a photograph that I took of glass shattered from the Sloviansk hospital in Ukraine when I was there. So, you know, it's so for me, an image would be this kind of composite of these different times and places and mediations on the page, and that's what our kind of series of blueprints. But it has that physicality, it has that materiality in the plan, if you like, as part of that frame.
So what I did when I saw the title, and we briefly talked about it, I of course started to look up the history of this design decision a bit. And actually I was really wondering why they replaced the colorful, like in the Macintosh, the colorful beach ball with this gray scale thing. For me, I think but that probably shows my age, the most representative weighting icon was the hourglass, that maybe people still remember that used to be the cursor symbol. I think also in the Macintosh, it probably was one of the first ones that was quickly replaced by the watch, the brief watch symbol. But for me, actually, it would be sort of the hourglass, because that also is a better representation of my experience, especially with a bit older technology, that they can actually die, which Macintoshes did quite frequently in the early years. So.
Well, in my case, being a product of Tumblr, it's more tied to this meme culture of thinking. It literally was used to represent like, oh, I'm stumped. And in a way, it's also memory. It's trying to go through everything that's running through your head and coming up with the answer, the witty answer, the quick thing. But at the same time, it's in terms of internet culture, it's always this it was this frustration of being in the 90s, loading a web page, and it was slide by slide, or it could be worse. It could be like a pixelated image, and then little by little, it came back until you got the thing. So to me, the Throbber is frustration in a way, but it's also a process of remembering and thinking. And I don't know, that's as far as I go with the Throbber in terms of academic thought.
Is this one? Oh, that was really great, thank you. I was thinking the idea of buffering circle, quite interesting, because we came from the classic progress bar, and then it's like, oh, okay, you are 50% or 75%, and you could more or less make a calculation. I was always quite impressed, like, oh, okay, 3 minutes, and then just 1 second later, 3 hours. Mm. And it was like, okay, why are you playing with me? I mean, you are showing something that is growing. I expect to go in the same direction. Of course, it depends on a lot of things. That was, yeah, fantastic. I think we can open up. So if everyone from the publicum have a question, will be great. We still have, okay, we have some voluntary. I will just go here.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentations. I just want to maybe listen more about this idea of why we need archive and why we need to preserve things, and if we are really open to really radical transformations, because nowadays I'm working with some indigenous people, indigenous community in Brazil, and work with them like in the intersection between them and the museum collections. And then it's very interesting because some of these indigenous researchers or artists, they are not very concerned about preserve the pieces. The idea, the most important thing for them is not necessary to create a physical archive, but it's basically to share the experience between the oral history or oral practices. And they teach me that this is so important, because when you need to tell again something or describe a piece or a experience and so on, you're also become part of this process in a way. And so this is so radical, right? But I think we are not open to this kind of radicalities. Like we create so many museums, so many archives, CD rooms, and so on. And now we have this big problem. Like, okay, so how can we preserve these objects? Like, because this is every time that I visit like a collection in the museum, like inside, not the exhibition rooms, but inside the museum, I always think, oh my God, we're just creating more problems, because you need to preserve these pieces, and they are complicated, and especially for digital artworks, we need to preserve them, and then you need to interview again the artist to ask permissions. So this is a problem, right? And maybe because we are not open for more radical actions. And I think this is also related to this idea of the artist, the author, the guy that creates something, and in the other side you have not a person, but you have a community, right? You have a lot of people that together decide this is important. Let's share this for the future, and also let's be part of this. Let's transform this. So I'm just thinking about these radical decisions. And how can we embrace this, or no, we are not interested in these kind of things. It's just some thoughts, but I would love to know more about your thoughts about this. Thank you.
That's a great. Can I answer the question slightly differently, but to get something about an approach that's anti-archival, anti-storage, and that is about orality, really, and the case I mentioned earlier on, the work I've been doing in Japan. So faced with, obviously, the diminishment of the living memory of the survivors and how to capture that testimony. Of course, that testimony is recorded, it's online, it's in audio and visual, et cetera. But what Hiroshima have done, they're getting the remaining hibakusha to train what they call storytellers. So each survivor will have something like, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 40 people that they train to be like them. So they spend 2 years training this group of people. So then the storytellers can actually speak as if they are the survivor, that level of detail. And then after 2 years, if they're certified, then these storytellers then appear in Hiroshima Museum. You can go and listen to them and hear this survivor. And so this is kind of this new orality, this kind of generational training program, which is really curious. But it's curious for other reasons. Firstly, it's not like human memory at all, because human memory, as we know, is fallible and full of distortions and changes all the time. These storytellers have this fixed training of what the survivor saw and felt and experienced on the day back in the 1945. But it's also actually a means of control. So the city, the museum in Hiroshima, the state really want to have this very kind of fixed narrative about what these survivors say and what the storytellers then tell about, that's relevant to the present or relevant to the politics of nuclear peace, yeah? And so it's very fixed. But some of these storytellers have gone rogue. Some of them are starting to make stuff up, and they've become these kind of minor celebrities in Japan. So even though you've got this really, really, really tightly controlled version of storytelling, it's still got messy. And of course now they're moving to the AI era. They've got all sorts of challenges. But I just thought that was an example, at least, not quite your question, but an example of something that is about creation or production, reproduction, persistence of memory that's anti-archival.
Yeah, I thought I would maybe also differentiate between remembering, archiving objects, objects are also stories for sure, but still, I'm really quite happy to find or dig sometimes in archives and find people who actually had attempts to shift politics, to do something. So to see, okay, not every generation has to start from the scratch. We could link that, yeah? There could be this conversation and actually there happened something before. Maybe we can just take these ideas, thoughts, inventions, and I don't know, work with them nowadays and not to. We had this yesterday, I think, in the panel, this culture of forgetting by Gabrielle, and like how maybe also the state is involved in this. Like, what do we remember? What do we forget? And what, which parts? Why do we talk so much about dinosaurs but not about the indigenous people? Or like, for example, where is the emphasis? So. I'm a bit ambivalent about this radicality in this, but maybe, dealing with objects, I would maybe go with you, Maybe someone else.
I agree with the problem, but I think it's a problem of the institutions first and foremost, like how they are unable to adapt to these different forms of economies of experience and subjectivity, production of subjectivity, of individuality, of community as well, trans-individuality perhaps. But it's always important to remember that oral culture is also an externalization of memory, and it's also a technology. We were talking about poetry a couple days ago, and poetry is mnemotechnics. Like, you have rhythms, and these are ways to kind of encode information and remember it and pass it around, so that, there is some sort of social glue that is produced by these sounds, these rhythms, these reverberations. We could go very Stigler about it and kind of compare how these different forms of materializing or externalizing memory allows for different complexities, yes. But I think that it's important to, just have that in mind. Like, it's different, but and the museum should change.
So to add to that, like humanity has always tried to remember. You drew how many mammoths you killed. You collected like the figurines that reminded you of where to go to hunt, right? All these things that we had. What has changed, I believe, in the last 60 years is the amount that we collect. We used to be more selective in our collections. We had like individual collections. Like I had this fascination with the ships that were coming, like where I lived, right? And I would keep a log of that. But now we collect everything, and it's part of this technology drive. Like, we are turning every little bit of our experience into data, because data has power, data has this ability to shape the world. And the more data that someone controls, the better they are at shaping this. And one of the problems with this is that we have so much that we forget so much. And when we give up that memory, that remembrance, and we subjugate it or surrogate it to someone else to store in everything, we start to forget our mistakes, our errors, our everything. And we can see it right now with politics. We can see it in how a politician can say something today, and in 3 days he's saying the exact opposite, and nobody remembers. So the problem here is not that we're collecting, it's that we're collecting too much. At the same time, if we don't collect and if we forget these things, we are giving up our future, because there's no way of building if you don't have a past. So I think what we need to do as institutions, which is I think what concerns you the most, because this is one of the problems. Once a thing comes into the museum, it has to be accessioned, and once it's in, to get it out, it's a nightmare. And sometimes we have to be a little bit more able to say, you know what, maybe we don't want this. We may make a mistake, but if we keep growing our collections in this senseless manner, things are going to be forgotten. And we've seen this in the British Museum when I was studying. There's literal cases of things from the 17 and 1800s under the stairs in the British Museum that have not been opened, have not been cataloged. We don't know what is in there. It's forgotten, even though it's collected and it's like preserved, but it's worthless in terms of for humanity as a group, right? So I think that's what I wanted to add, like this idea that maybe we have to rethink how we collect more than stop collecting or forgetting.
There is a question in the background.
Oh.
Thank you for self-organizing.
Is it Andrew? I'm sorry. Something Andrew said still lingers with me, which is if we have new forms of memory, maybe we will have new forms of forgetting. And the more I keep rolling that in my mind, the more I become, I really would like to know what does it mean to have, like, what might be new forms of forgetting. And so I want to ask not just Andrew, but actually everyone on the stage, including the moderators or the panelists, what might that mean? What are new forms of forgetting? I find that rather compelling thing to think about.
Thank you so much for your question. Yeah, I was posing the question really. I don't have an answer, but I would suggest that some examples of new forms of forgetting, certainly, well, no, not new, but different versions of policy. I mean, right to be forgotten, the idea that we actually need some kind of mechanism enshrined in European law to help us forget, help us erase personal data. So that's one. But there's a whole new forgetting service industry growing. You know, a number of companies will, you pay them enough, they will help you be forgotten. They will go through very dodgy means, searching through your histories, the spread, the fragments of your life and data that's scattered everywhere, and they will remove it or erase it or delete it to the extent that they are able to. And there's been a number of stories in recent years whereby, you know, these are, you know, they're using increasingly dodgy means to do this. So that's two examples I can think of not necessarily new forms of forgetting, but new versions of those forms of forgetting.
I would add, we also already do have sort of a not quite new, but in technical terms, it's voluntary or involuntary data loss, which I think every one of us has already experienced, which is a new form of amnesia, maybe, depending on how much data you lose and what sort of data you lose. But I think everyone who's dealing with research has this happen, and all of a sudden the memory stick you just saved the latest chapter on, it just doesn't work any longer, and you have to sort of try to find out a way to resurrect the data you have. So I think this is a quite common experience, which I would actually term as sort of a new form of data, of forgetting. The other thing, I totally concur that I think we need policies for making it easier for people to abstain from leaving data permanently on the web. And we all, I think, also have the experience how difficult it is to to get rid of photographs or stuff that you have posted. And the third point I would like to make is maybe it's also a form of forgetting that you don't sort of take care of all the data you produce, in that you don't really index all the pictures you take, which happens to me quite frequently. I just have a folder where it says these are images from the exhibition such and such, but I don't really sort of really index the individual photos. So I have troves of images that have IMG XXX, and how do I work with that? How do I sort of retrieve any information from that if the pile gets, or if the files get into the thousands? So I think that could be another form of forgetting that actually it could be practiced, but I wanted to go back to a remark I had in my presentation is this observation that pictures, especially selfies, have become a form of communication or sharing, and they're not made for keeping. So that's another, for me, that's another form, as a person who has grown up with analog photography, that's a totally new way of dealing with what was once the memorial sort of technology par excellence for a while, and now this observation that there's this casual, very casual use of images of yourself, to me is something that I have to understand, sort of, or I'm still grappling with, but that might be another form of forgetting.
And maybe I could just add something, picking up the policy making, and whenever there are changes in access of online services, for instance, or software changes, we have mass extinction events. Collateral damage also, especially in the art world. I'm touched with that. And for instance, we have also loss if we think about the web archive being under distributed denial of service attacks, things like that. So all of a sudden we have a lot of data that are not to be taken for granted. And if I read that, for instance, the web archive does not only have problems with hacking, but it has also problems with authorship law suits. So we can't take that granted either. And another thing that came to my mind is maybe we meanwhile react also on the fact that there is a lot of data of us around and is sticking around, that we might go into stealth mode. So I was also wondering whether or not we change our habits of which data we distribute also in the future.
No, it's just that when you mentioned selfies, I remember, well, Snapchat, Instagram, and a lot of other platforms that all have expiration dates built in the messages, especially selfies. But yeah, in general, I'm pro forgetting, I guess. And every time I come in a panel with Victor, I find myself on the other side of the table, defending memory and clinging to stuff. And the image that I get when I think about new forms of forgetting is like when your browser crashes and you lose all the tabs that you were planning to read at some point, and you realize that it doesn't make a difference. But trying to move a little bit away from the art discussion and going a little bit back to the indigenous populations problem, there's a work by Paulo Tavares just in the exhibition here that is actually one of many attempts to identify ruins of indigenous civilizations in the Brazilian rainforest and Amazon, which are extremely hard to find because of the kind of construction material they did. So in a way, also a sort of externalization of the self through technology that's very hard to read because these are kind of elusive traces, and we don't have the proper materials. Like if you go to the Incan civilizations, you have buildings made of stone, and that's easier to do. And a lot of these attempts right now that use like LiDAR technology and aerial imaging are being done so that these sites can be listed and preserved and protected from exploitation. So in a sense, it's also good to think about the power of memory beyond more immediate ways of cultural exchange and yeah, our framework of art. Even though we're talking about very modern ways of dealing with things, both cases, you know, the art exhibitions and preservation and like preserving sites, territorial sovereignty, yeah.
So the discussion has moved on a bit, but I was going to go back to what Inge just said, and I checked some guidelines for preserving CD-ROMs and CDs and all these data carriers. And the interesting thing was that they were very explicit and very ample guidelines on how to preserve the physical disk, but when it came to how to preserve the accessibility of the contents, they're quite vague. And I liked when I read, I think it was the Australian National Library that wrote, you need a timely plan for doing that. But what also struck me, and I think that was the British Library's guide, was the warning that even strategies for migrating data from these carriers might be jeopardized by authors' rights. And there we're back to these, that our old structures of thinking about especially art or creative works as connected to an author might actually undercut efforts to save them. So that's what I found super striking, is this warning. You have to be aware that simply taking the data from the CD-ROM and putting it on another storage system, you might be in violation of data protection. Not data protection, but what's the English for Urheber? Copyright. So that to me was like a really interesting gap that sort of arose. And that might be another form of forgetting.
Okay, I'm really sorry to say that, yeah, we should finish. It's 5, yeah, so slowly. But we can continue the discussion. I mean, there is nothing, or we can forget the discussion. I mean, they're both of the same. So I will close right now because we have to prepare, because later we have a lecture performance by Afri Kanani. And we have to prepare that because it's a little bit different as we plan. Yeah, and there is a last thing I want to comment with you. And there's the Germans refer to the contemporaries as the Zeitgenossen. That I don't know if Duden will agree with me, but it's like the people that enjoys the same time somehow. And I was thinking, okay, what about and Genossa is also the word that is used for comrade, or was used for comrade. And so we are sharing this time, so we are sharing the enjoyment of this time, so maybe we can, yeah, that will be interesting. And at some point, maybe tomorrow, we will not share this time anymore, but we may share the enjoyment of the remembering it or forgetting it. So I don't know, I think I will write them later to them, asking if they have Erinnerungsgenossen or Vergessensgenossen or something like that. I hope that's kind of the relation we are establishing. And that will be it. So thank you very much, everyone participating. It was really great. The discussion was super. And of course, also the people making that possible that are, yeah, behind the scenes. Thank you very much.